She'll smile, she'll say she's at peace, she'll act like she's unbothered. But the moment you truly disappear, that silence will start speaking louder than her pride ever could. When a woman says she's fine, when she posts like she's glowing, when she carries herself as if nothing touched her, most men take it at face value. They assume she's moved on. They assume the connection meant less to her than it did to them. And that assumption is exactly what weakens their position, because what looks like peace is often protection. Emotional detachment on the surface doesn't mean emotional detachment underneath. Sometimes it means she's guarding herself, guarding her pride, guarding ego, guarding the image she wants to maintain both to you and to the world. Admitting she misses you would mean admitting vulnerability, and vulnerability feels risky when the dynamic has shifted. So she performs peace. She tells herself she's okay. She tells her friends she's okay. She convinces herself that distance was the right decision. But here's what most men don't understand. Emotions don't disappear just because someone declares they're calm. Feelings don't evaporate because someone posts happy pictures or keeps busy. Real attachment lingers when you've shared time, energy, emotion, experiences. That imprint doesn't just shut off, it goes quiet. And quiet emotions are often the most powerful ones because they operate internally. Her peace is often a shield against discomfort. Because if she admits she misses you, she has to confront questions she doesn't want to face. Did she overact? Did she underestimate you? Did she push away something stable? Those thoughts create internal tension, and tension is uncomfortable. So it's easier to look composed than to feel exposed. This is why reacting to her fake peace is a mistake. The moment you try to break through it, the moment you send emotional messages, question her feelings, or try to force clarity, you validate the mask. You allow her to stay in control. You give her reassurance that no matter how calm she pretends to be, you're still emotionally available. But when you don't react, something shifts. When you genuinely step back, when your presence is no longer accessible, when your attention is no longer predictable, her protective calm loses stability. Because now there's space, and space forces reflection. Without your messages, without your energy, without your reassurance or silence, silence removes distractions. In that silence, memories resurface, conversations replay, moments feel heavier. What once felt replaceable begins to feel rare, and the peace she projected starts competing with the reality of your absence. The key is that your withdrawal must be real, not dramatic, not bitter, not manipulative. Real. You're not disappearing to punish. You're stepping back because you value yourself. You're redirecting energy into your mission, your growth, your purpose. When your absence comes from strength, not hurt, it carries weight. She may continue acting composed. She may continue projecting calm, but internally, the contrast between her performed peace and your genuine silence starts creating cracks, because protection can only hold as long as there's no real loss. And when she begins to feel that losing you is a possibility, peace turns into pressure. Let your absence reveal what her words never will. When you remove yourself completely, something powerful happens that most men never anticipate. You're no longer there to distract her. No more casual check ins, no more inside jokes, no more emotional reassurance. And without those constant interactions, her mind doesn't stay quiet, it gets louder. Silence forces reflection. When you were present every day, when your messages were consistent and your attention predictable, there was comfort. But comfort often dulls awareness. People don't fully evaluate what they have when it's constantly available. It blends into routine, it feels guaranteed, and what feels guaranteed rarely feels urgent. But when that presence disappears, routine breaks. Now there's space where your voice used to be, there's quiet where your energy once existed. And in that quiet, the mind starts replaying things. Conversations resurface, memories resurface, the way you handled situations, the stability you brought, the ladder, the emotional grounding. All of it becomes more vivid because it's no longer current, it's gone. And absence sharpens memory. What once felt normal begins to feel valuable. What once felt comfortable begins to feel rare. That's the psychological shift silence creates. You're no longer competing for attention. You're no longer trying to prove anything. Your absence forces comparison. She begins to compare the emotional security she had with you to whatever exists now. And comparison is powerful. If what replaced you doesn't match the same depth, strength, or consistency, the contrast becomes obvious. This is where regret quietly begins, not loud regret, not dramatic regret, internal regret, the kind that grows slowly, the kind that whispers questions late at night. Did I underestimate him? Was I too quick to detach? Did I confuse comfort with boredom? Reflection doesn't happen when someone is constantly stimulated, it happens in stillness. And stillness is exactly what no contact creates. Most men sabotage this process because they can't tolerate silence themselves. They assume if they feel the void, she must not. So they reach out, they break the space, they interrupt the reflection, and in doing that, they reset the dynamic back to comfort, the very place where their value was being overlooked. But when you remain composed, when you let the silence breathe, you allow emotional weight to build naturally. She doesn't just remember you, she feels the difference. The absence becomes tangible. It's important to understand that this isn't about revenge or manipulation. It's about giving reality time to surface. When distractions fade, truth rises. And the truth is that strong presence leaves strong imprints. Emotional stability leaves marks. Leadership leaves impressions. If you were grounded, confident, and steady during the connection, that imprint doesn't vanish, it lingers. And in silence, the longer the space remains uninterrupted, the deeper the reflection goes because silence removes illusion. It removes ego driven narratives. It leaves only memory and comparison. And when comparison starts favoring what's gone, absence begins to feel heavier than pride. Let silence do what explanations never could. There's another layer most men completely overlook, and that's pride. Pride is powerful. Pride will make someone act unbothered even when they're deeply affected. Pride will keep a woman from reaching out first, even if she's thinking about you constantly. Not because she doesn't care, but because caring feels like losing control. When a connection shifts or ends, emotions don't disappear, but ego steps in to manage them. The ego says, don't chase. The ego says, don't look weak. The ego says, if he cared, he would reach out. And so she waits, not because she feels nothing, but because pride is protecting her vulnerability. And here's where most men fail the test. They interpret her silence as indifference. They assume if she hasn't texted, she must not be thinking about them. So they reach out to relieve their own anxiety. They break first, they reassure, they pursue. And the moment they do, her pride is validated. She didn't have to risk anything. She didn't have to be vulnerable. She maintained control. But when you don't break, something shifts internally for her. Now pride has to compete with curiosity. Now ego has to compete with emotion. Because if you're truly silent, not posting indirectly for her, not sending subtle signals, not trying to get her attention, she starts to question the situation differently. Why hasn't he reached out? Is he really okay? Is he moving on? And those questions create tension because pride works best when it feels safe, when it believes you'll eventually fold, when it believes your attention is still accessible. But when your silence feels genuine, pride begins to feel risky. She may want to text, she may draft messages and delete them. She may check your profile, she may ask mutual friends about you casually, but reaching out would mean admitting she feels something. And that's where internal conflict grows. This is the psychological battle, not between you and her, but between her ego and her emotions. The stronger your absence, the louder that internal conflict becomes. If you were always the one initiating before, your silence feels even heavier now because patterns have changed. Predictability is gone, and unpredictability triggers curiosity. Women are emotionally intuitive. When a man shifts his energy completely, it's felt. And when that shift comes from strength instead of bitterness, it creates intrigue. It suggests growth. It suggests confidence. It suggests he's not waiting. And that's what unsettles pride the most because pride relies on the belief that you'll come back for validation, that you need closure, that you'll seek reassurance. When you don't, it forces a new narrative, one where she might actually have to take the emotional risk. This is why patience is power. The man who can sit in silence without reacting holds the advantage, not because he's playing games, but because he's emotionally disciplined. He's not trying to win her back through words. He's allowing her own emotions to confront her pride, and when emotions start outweighing ego, reaching out no longer feels like losing, it feels necessary. Stay silent long enough for pride to feel the pressure. There comes a point where the performance can't hold anymore. The smiling pictures, the calm responses, the I'm good energy, it starts to feel heavier to maintain than it does to drop because pretending costs energy. Acting unbothered requires control, and control becomes exhausting when emotions underneath are unresolved. Your absence is what exposes that exhaustion. When you're no longer there filling gaps, she has to sit with her own thoughts without interruption. And here's what happens in that space reality replaces narrative. The story she told herself about Wyatt and it starts clashing with actual memories. The justifications begin to feel thinner, the certainty begins to soften, because when you're gone long enough, the emotional high ground she thought she had doesn't feel as solid. At first, she may double down. She may reinforce the idea that she's fine. She may stay busy. She may even distract herself with attention from others. But distractions don't replicate depth. They don't replicate familiarity. They don't replicate the emotional safety that came from someone who truly understood her. Surface attention feels different than real connection, and that difference becomes more obvious over time. When she realizes that what you offered wasn't common, that your steadiness, your patience, your consistency weren't easily replaced, that's when internal discomfort begins turning into longing. Not loud longing, not dramatic gestures, quiet longing. She starts remembering how you handled pressure, how you didn't overact, how you stayed grounded. She remembers moments she took for granted. And here's the key: absence magnifies value. When something is constantly available, it's easy to underestimate. But when it's removed completely, perspective sharpens. She begins to see you not through the lens of temporary emotion, but through the lens of loss. Loss clarifies, and the longer you remain unavailable, the clearer that picture becomes. This is why reacting prematurely ruins the effect. The moment you resurface too soon, you relieve the pressure, you interrupt the realization, you give her emotional relief before reflection fully matures. But when you allow time to do its work, the weight of your absence builds naturally, and emotional weight creates urgency. She may not admit it publicly. She may not show it immediately, but internally, the question shifts from "I'm fine without him" to "what if he's really gone?" That shift is powerful because now it's not about ego anymore, it's about potential regret. And regret is one of the strongest emotional drivers there is. The fear of losing something valuable permanently hits deeper than temporary pride ever could. But here's the critical part: your absence must be aligned with growth. If you're silent but stagnant, it carries no gravity. If you're silent but still emotionally attached and waiting, it feels weak energetically. True absence is rooted in forward motion. You're improving, you're building, you're focused. When your life expands without her, your value increases in her mind. And when she senses that you're not pausing your world for her return, the illusion of control dissolves completely. Let your growth make your absence undeniable. At this stage, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. The emotional pressure that has been building quietly inside her starts looking for release. Thoughts that were once occasional become frequent. Curiosity turns into concern. And the absence that once felt manageable now feels heavy because now it's not just about missing you, it's about uncertainty. When you were present, even if things weren't perfect, there was clarity. She knew where you stood. She knew she could reach you. She knew that if she needed reassurance, you were emotionally available. But now that certainty is gone and uncertainty creates tension. She begins to wonder who has your attention now. She wonders if someone else is experiencing the version of you she once had access to. She questions whether the door is still open or if it has quietly closed. And those questions don't come from ego, they come from emotional investment. The human mind struggles more with unknown outcomes than known ones. If she was convinced you'd always be there, she could relax into her pride. But when your silence feels final, when your energy feels redirected, when your life appears to be moving forward without hesitation, the unknown becomes uncomfortable. And discomfort drives action. You may notice subtle signs before anything direct happens. She might watch your stories again. She might engage in small ways, like a reaction, a casual reply. These are not random, they're temperature checks. She's measuring your availability without risking too much because reaching out directly requires vulnerability. And vulnerability feels safer when there's evidence that the connection still exists. But here's where your strength matters most. If you react too eagerly to small signals, you reset the dynamic. You show that the door never really closed. You communicate that your silence was temporary, not transformational, and that removes the emotional urgency she's beginning to feel. However, when you remain grounded, when you respond calmly, not desperately, you reinforce the shift. You show that you're open, but not waiting, interested, but not chasing, present, but not invested without reciprocation. That balance changes everything. Because now, if she wants deeper connection again, she must step forward intentionally. She must meet you halfway. And that's when effort becomes visible. The truth is, attraction often grows in space. Emotional appreciation often grows in absence. Once she realizes that your presence was a privilege, not a guarantee, her approach shifts naturally. It's no longer about testing you, it's about securing what feels valuable. But this only happens if your silence was authentic, if your growth was real, if your confidence wasn't performative. Women don't respond to forced absence, they respond to genuine self respect. When she senses that you're not playing a game, that you truly value your time and energy, it forces her to reevaluate her own level of investment. And when investment increases on her side, pursuit becomes mutual. Let her curiosity turn into courage. And this is where everything either comes together or falls apart. Because when she finally reaches that point, when curiosity has turned into courage, when pride has softened, when absence has done its work, the dynamic is no longer the same. The power balance has shifted. Not because you forced it, but because you change. If she comes back, it won't be because you chased her. It won't be because you convinced her. It will be because your absence revealed your value. And when someone rediscovers value on their own, it hits deeper than anything you could have explained. But here's the part most men get wrong at this final stage: they abandon the growth that created the shift in the first place. The moment she reappears, they overinvest. They go back to over texting, over explaining, over prioritizing. They unconsciously communicate, "I was waiting." And that subtle energy resets everything because attraction thrives on strength, not relief. If she returns, you must remain centered. Your mission doesn't pause. Your self respect doesn't shrink. Your boundaries don't soften. You welcome her presence, but you don't revolve around it. You engage, but you don't cling. You're open, but not dependent. because the lesson of absence wasn't about getting her back. It was about becoming the man who doesn't lose himself. When you truly internalize that, something powerful happens. Even if she never returns, you win because you've detached from the need for validation. You've redirected your focus inward. You've strengthened your emotional discipline. And ironically, that's the energy that attracts most. Women are drawn to men who choose themselves without bitterness, men who can walk away without hostility, men who improve instead of pleading. Your silence wasn't punishment, it was alignment. Alignment with your standards, alignment with your value. If she steps forward with genuine effort, you assess it calmly. You don't rush to lock it in. You observe consistency. You allow her actions to speak because real reconciliation isn't built on emotional spikes. It's built on sustained behavior. And if her effort isn't consistent, you don't panic. You don't chase. You don't negotiate your worth. You simply continue moving forward. That's the ultimate shift. Your absence forced reflection in her, but your growth ensures stability in you, and stability is magnetic. It creates safety, it creates respect, it creates long term attraction. In the end, this was never about making her miss you. It was about becoming the version of yourself who doesn't need to be missed to feel whole. Let her return be a bonus, not the goal.